I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. This is the Beyond the Mouse podcast, the podcast for all things Disney for NPR Illinois Community Voices and for the Front Row Network. I am your host, Craig, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Brett Rutherford.
Hello.
And Miss Vanessa Ferguson.
Hello.
How are you two doing today? I'm excited because we've got a really fun interview. Such a fun interview to have. We actually have been kind of behind the podcast. We've been waiting and hoping for this interview to happen for a while, and we are excited to get the opportunity to talk today to Kevin Rafferty, who is an Imagineer that basically whatever you've ridden in the Disney parks recently, Kevin has had some hand in, from the Tower of Terror to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway to Cars Land to Test Track. We talk about so many things that we love about the Disney parks all the time, and Kevin is instrumental in all of those properties. We cannot wait to talk to him today. Brett, tell me, are you excited about this interview?
I'm excited because, well, I mean, he's done it all, and we're going to talk to him. And oh my gosh, I'm sorry, freaking out. Sorry, I will calm down. I will calm down.
Vanessa, what do you think?
Well, I am just so excited to talk to him. Obviously, we read the book near the beginning of the pandemic, and it was just so delightful. It was like a breath of fresh air in a time that was a bit chaotic. So it was so fun to talk about Disney, and his humor in the book is just, oh, it's so fun. I feel like I already know him, so I can't wait to talk to him.
We should mention that he does have his own book out there, and it is incredible. I'll hold it up here, but I'm sure Brett will do some magic for our video viewers as well. But it's called Magic Journey, My Fantastical Walt Disney Imagineering Career. And it truly is a great book. It's a wonderful present for anybody that is a Disney fan in your life. I know we're in the holiday season, and this is actually Thanksgiving week, and we are so thankful for this conversation, first of all, but also this is a great purchase for someone that's interested in the parks or wants to keep that love of Disney alive. Kevin really walks you through his entire career, and his career is phenomenal. It's just incredible, the opportunities and the magic that he has brought us all. So I cannot recommend it enough. And I want to get to this interview. So here we go. Here's our interview with Kevin Rafferty. And we are pleased to welcome Kevin Rafferty to Beyond the Mouse, NPR Illinois Community Voices partner. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great, Craig. Thank you very much. This is exciting. This is fun.
Absolutely. We're so excited to get to talk to you today, and especially because we all loved your book so much, Magic Journey, My Fantastical Career in Disney Imagineering. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. We can't recommend it enough, and we'll talk about it a lot during this conversation. But my first question to you actually is really where your career started with Disney and where the book starts. So you started as a dishwasher at Disneyland, and you could tell from the very first page that working for Disney was something that you really wanted to do. What was it about the company that really drew you to wanting to be part of the Disney team?
Well, that's a great question. I think the answer is pretty easy in that as a creative soul, I was always enamored and inspired and entertained by the entire world of Disney, by its showmanship, the art, the design, the storytelling, TV shows. I mean, every Sunday night, my family and I were gathered around the TV for, Wonderful World of Disney and Disney movies and animated movies. And I grew up down the street from Disneyland. So I have memories lying in my bedroom at night, listening to the fireworks at Disneyland just down the street. And you know what? I still can today.
Oh, wow.
That's so cool. Well, I actually have the next question, I believe. So you can tell by the book that you just bring so much joy into what you are doing, and you seem like such a fun guy. We feel like we already know you. And when we interviewed Tom K. Morris, he essentially said, you are a fun guy, but you also know when to take a project seriously. So it got me thinking, can you tell us a little bit about your leadership style and your philosophy about motivating those you are working with or those who are working under your direction?
Sure, Vanessa. My leadership style might be a little unorthodox from most, because this is going to sound really weird, but I like to let the project itself, the vision, lead the team. I'm just kind of there to course correct, and I'm actually a roll up my sleeves kind of guy, and I work alongside my team members. But when I work on the creation of an idea for an attraction concept, for example, I work really hard to make sure that the story of the attraction and the vision is crystal clear. And then everybody can kind of rally around that and own it together. And if you know exactly what it is, then you can kind of decipher how you're going to get there, how you're going to bring it to life, and Imagineering dreams come true because teams come through. And I always applaud and my team and tell them how much I appreciate them, and they're involved in every aspect of it. So it's not just me, and them, it's me with them. But there's kind of a magic that happens in that the team gets really passionate about the idea because they know exactly what it is. They own it together. They feed off each other's passion and ideas. And when we're working on a project that's really special, in fact, my last project, Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway at Disney's Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World, the entire team knew we had something really special. And so that's what kept us going. That's what fueled us. That's what fired us up every day, and each other as well. So it's also about mutual respect and appreciation and admiration for all of the achievements that the team is accomplishing step by step as we bring it from what I like to call from the spark all the way to the park.
That's wonderful. You know what I think is interesting about how you're talking about the collaboration, just in reading the book, what I loved about the writing style that you have is that it truly is like you're having a conversation with us as we're reading, because the way that you write is extremely conversational, and it's just really fun. So that's one of the things that you don't get that a lot out of these type of memoirs or anything. You have so much fun in your writing, and you can tell that maybe you bring that fun to your work as well, and you have to in Imagineering, right? So that's just wonderful. But Brett, I know, has a question about your early work at Disneyland.
Okay.
Well, we all loved reading your book, and I especially loved reading about your early Disneyland work experiences. And it was so funny, when I was reading it, I texted Vanessa to say that she was really going to love your humor and your storytelling skills.
Yeah, I did.
And she, and I'm like, oh, you're going to love it. So, but you also wrote in your book that although you wanted to be an animator, storytelling was where your real talent lies. How did that realization come about? Was it a means to an ends, or some really, really hard soul searching?
You know what, Brett? It's really, and I love that question because I really didn't know that the story was in me until I kind of discovered that. I was kind of misled in thinking that it was about the visual art. And what I mean by that is, I was, another answer to the question about why I wanted to work for Disney is because of just beautifully rendered and hand-drawn movies like Pinocchio, and Claude Coates was the background designer for artist for a lot of the backgrounds for Pinocchio, and his work just so inspired me. And I actually, sidebar story, I got to work with Claude at Walt Disney Imagineering years later, which was a real thrill. But I always thought it was the art that was that was the emotion, but it's part of the emotion. The real art of an animated film is the power of the story that actually pulls you in and makes you forget about where you are and what's going on. In fact, I've had lots of experiences where, as an Imagineer, I've been invited into early animated film works in progress. And even though they're just pencil sketches on the storyboard, I know it's going to be great because that all goes away and I get so pulled into the story. Well, I always wanted to be an animator because I wanted to be a visual animator and make moving pictures and draw moving pictures and things like that. But as I evolved and progressed in my career at Imagineering, and I realized that it's not so much the drawing, but the art of storytelling. And that's the magic of an animated film. And as my career progressed and I became more involved with story development and script writing and things like that, it suddenly dawned on me that I'm glad that not that there's anything wrong with being an animator. It's absolutely an amazing profession, but I'm glad I didn't become an animator because there was a storyteller inside of me waiting to get out, and I didn't know that until I began the Imagineering story in my career, and I realized the value of creating immersive, experiential, three-dimensional stories, which kind of harkens back to Walt Disney's original plan for Disneyland, in that that was his next logical step as a storyteller. After television and movies, how else can he immerse his guests into the stories? Well, to do it physically. And so I'm very blessed to have kind of gone that route and have discovered myself in that regard. And then back to the writing style of the book, everybody always kept saying, when are you going to write your book? When are you going to write your book? Well, I never really set out to write a book as much as I just sat down to tell stories. And maybe that's the style that comes out. It's just like me talking, and that's just the way I write.
It worked.
Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly love it. And it's really interesting because your story, figuring out that storytelling element, it's kind of entwined in the Disney company, because we've heard about from the other Disney legends who may have started as animators and then were brought into WED or whatever the case may be. Exitencio saying, I've never written lyrics to anything. And now he's so masterful with Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion and all of those other attractions that he was able to work on, and so it's very, very cool to hear that continues on, that kind of evolution of trying to figure out exactly where your best role might be, and that the company has allowed you to kind of foster that. And now I did bring a red pen today because I knew that Vanessa had a question about Marty Scalar.
I knew that's where it was going. Marty's red pen.
Nicely done, Craig. Well, we love all your stories about Marty, and thank you for sharing his notes to you with us. For the listeners who haven't yet read your book, what was it like working with Marty, and do you have any favorite stories that didn't make it into the book? And if not, what was your favorite Marty story?
Well, Marty Scalar was with Walt Disney Imagineering for over 50 years, which is pretty remarkable. And he was kind of our fearless leader for a big majority of those years. And I personally got to know and work with and got to love Marty Scalar for about 30 plus of those years. And we had a really great relationship. We had a lot of fun. And earlier in our conversation, we were talking about having fun. And Marty always used to say, well, you can't really create fun unless you're having fun yourself. And we really did. But, Marty, as much of a great sense of humor as he had, and as a great leader as he was, and a mentor and a friend, he also was a great example, because I think I have really, Vanessa, I have 10 million stories I could go on all day about Marty. But the one that really sticks with me, actually, in a strange way, doesn't really have anything to do with the humor and the fun that we had. It had to do with how much Marty really loved what he did and how much he really loved the parks. And the evidence of that was one day Marty and I were invited to go to a media event that was going to take place in the Golden Horseshoe venue. And it was going to start early in the morning. And Marty, as it turned out, was a lot like me, in that when I had things going on at Disneyland, I would always get there really, really early so I could kind of walk around all by myself and just kind of take it all in and enjoy it. And I got there that particular morning about 6:15. And I was actually surprised to see Marty in the distance because he had just gotten out of a recent surgery. So he was kind of hobbling along and walking with a cane. And I saw him do a double take and kind of veer off into Frontierland. And I didn't want him to know I was there. I just wanted to see what he was going to do. And so he got into Frontierland, and there was a little piece of paper, you know, about 2 inches square. And Marty kind of hobbled over there, and you could tell it pained him to reach down and pick that up. But he picked up that little piece of trash and he walked over and put it in the trash can and had a little smile on his face and went on his merry way. And he had no idea anybody was even around watching him do that. So that was just proof about how much he loved the parks and how much he influenced us in that regard, so that we could put all of our love into our work that went into those parks that he cared about so much.
That's just wonderful.
No detail
I
is
love that
overlooked.
story.
No,
That's
truly.
great.
That's just so wonderful. And, you know, you have brought so much joy into our lives because of the attractions that you have created, that you've worked on, so many numerous attractions. And you really go through many of them in the book. Although we need an addendum chapter for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I'm just going to throw that out there. You can release it digitally, whatever, and get that through. But we're going to go to Brett for the next question about an attraction.
Okay.
Well, it seems that you've worked on nearly every modern attraction, certainly everything that we love in the parks, and all of our favorites, as I said. But one particular favorite is, of course, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. It was so awesome reading about your creative process throughout the development of that attraction. How do you even begin that process of developing an attraction?
You know, that's another great question, Brett. There's so many different answers to that question. I mean, ideas are just kind of out there floating around, and when it's time for them to happen, they kind of cosmically land on the people required to make them happen, you know. And in my world, in the world of Imagineering and theme park design and development, you can be walking along and something will hit you like a ton of bricks. Driving along, you're in the shower and you come up with this idea, and, you know, we call that blue sky. And we call it blue sky because you get to float around in endless possibilities, and there's no such thing as a bad idea, and you can kind of develop that. And you do that just for the fun of it. But there are other more practical ways of how an attraction idea comes about. And actually, I'll give you a good example. My dear friend and colleague, Robert Colton, who I worked on many attractions with together, we were in the hallway at Imagineering one day, and we saw the president of Disneyland Resort coming down the hall towards us. And he said, "Hey, you guys are just the people I was looking for." And he began to explain how much he loved Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, and about how it was a family ride through game experience. And he said, "Well, can you guys think about what maybe the next one of those is?" And one of the things as an Imagineer is if a park leader or an executive brings something like that, a challenge or request to you, you know there's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen. And your little antennas go, beep, oh boy, we have a need, we have a want. And that's kind of how Robert and I cooked up Toy Story Midway Mania, and to satisfy that need. And so, you know, there are so many different ways. Sometimes we just have brainstormings at Imagineering. If we have like a blue sky brainstorming where we go to a particular park that has a need, for example, or some of them are just because we want to work on ideas that are just fun to work on. We have them in our back pockets, we have them in our hearts and in our minds. Can we just work on these? And we get, you know, special blue sky funding to do that. But it's been my experience that when there's a particular need, and as you know, I mentioned in the book, that's kind of how Cars Land came about. There was an executive who communicated a desire to think about something new for the park. And so that's really kind of the emphasis that really lights that fuse under you, that lights that spark that gets you going.
Wow. Well, it's so amazing. You know, I don't want you to do any sort of proprietary sort of reveals or anything like that, but just some insights are so good. You know, the whole floating. I've heard of blue sky before, but floating around in blue sky. I think I'm going to take that with me. So I'm like going, so good.
And that's one of my favorite places to be, by the way.
You know, so speaking of Tower of Terror in particular, it's a genius idea to make this into the Twilight Zone, but that's also kind of a risk for the Disney company because, of course, the connection to ABC and the Twilight Zone is a CBS property. So, but it seems like reading about and speaking with other Imagineers, you're really given this opportunity to take risks and to be bold. Is that how you would say the process works? Are you allowed to take those risks and to be bold in what you do?
I would say that's exactly how the process works. We are not only allowed to be bold, we are encouraged to be bold. We're encouraged to take risks. I mean, if you think about the product that we deliver into all of our parks and other entertainment venues around the world, a lot of them are brand new experiences, never before, experienced by anybody. Or delivered in a theatrical way that has never been done, or with a technology that has never been done before, and all of those come with great risks. And I remember some of my most successful pitches when it came to trying to sell an idea for a park. I remember standing up there pitching an idea to executives, and in the back of my head thinking, how are we ever going to do this? I'm pitching this idea, but I have no idea how we're going to do this. And the great thing about Imagineering is that there are so many brilliant people there that you can toss that challenge over to, and they'll figure out how to make it work. But it always comes with risk every time. And I'm suddenly reminded of something my dad told me often, and he said, "Son, if you don't risk it, you don't get the biscuit." So
that's perfect.
But that makes it fun too, when you're on the edge, when every day is a risk, when you don't know quite where you're going, or when you do know where you're going, but you don't know how you're going to get there. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes you rise to the occasion and just go for it.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Vanessa, you had our next question.
I do. So I loved the book. I loved all the puns. You're welcome. It was wonderful. But there was one section that for me read like a horror film. And that's because I suffer from motion sickness. So for those who haven't read the book, there's a scene where you're like in these speeding cars and you're being whipped around, and can you tell us more about that? And I think this was for the test track attraction,
right?
So how did you survive?
That's a good question. You take it for the team, you take it for the project. It's so funny that, and you're talking specifically about my experience at the General Motors test track in Milford, Michigan, when we were researching, working on the original test track for Epcot. But just a little side note here, it's really interesting that I am very conducive to motion sickness, and it seems weird that somebody that has my particular role, creating rides that are moving and things like that, I would be, I don't like to drop, and I worked on Twilight Zone, Tower of Terror, and I don't like to go fast, and I worked on Rock and Roller Coaster with Aerosmith and all of that kind of stuff. And that's part of the challenge. But the good news is I am a car guy. I love cars. And when you're in control of those cars, that's a different story than when you're a passenger. And I had both of those experiences on the test track in Milford. My first experience was I was a passenger with a professional driver out on an area that GM calls Black Lake, which is so big you can see it from the moon. And they call it Black Lake because when it rains, it looks like a lake. That's how big it is. And I was out there with the professional driver who was doing 360 spins, one after another, hard braking.
Oh my gosh.
Just crazy stuff.
This might do it for.
Oh man.
It was just, my stomach was out of my ears, and it was as incredible as the experience was, that wasn't really my thing, And I remember after the final maneuver, and I was so glad it was over, how he talked about, oh, good, we're just in time for lunch. And that's the last thing you want to think about is food when you're, when you're motion sick. But then the fun part of that trip was I got to drive this super high horsepower Corvette they called Mad Dog out on their speed loop. and I got to take it up to, you know, a couple 100 miles an hour, and that was a thrill. So that made up for the morning session where I was sicker than a dog, and the afternoon session I was happy as a clam. So you know, there's good that comes with the bad.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I was reading that. I kid you not. I kept going, oh no. Oh no. And then I'm like, is this posthumous? What is that?
I've never met anyone who can use Dramamine as a business expense. You know? I'm like going,
You've met one.
yeah. Patches. I need more patches. Patches. Anyway, so.
Well, of course, you have attractions all over the world. And so Brett wanted to ask about Tokyo.
Okay.
I can't wait for the opportunity to go to Tokyo Disneyland and Disney Sea. What's it like working at an overseas park as opposed to a domestic park? Was it any different? And in this instance, working with Oriental Land Company, is it really, really big budgets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer to that question is, you know, one of the things I learned about working on international projects, and I was not much of a traveler before all of this, was that no matter what country you're from, what culture you're from, what language you speak, you know, a good immersive storytelling experience speaks to you. I mean, stories are the same in every culture. And one of my big learning lessons that I had when I was over there was that you always have to know your audience. You know, one of the things in working on Imagineering projects, you have to become an expert on the subject matter. You have to become an expert on you know, cars or bugs or elevators, or, you know, and you become an expert on all these things. But one of the things that I learned on my international projects that I didn't think about when I went over there, because I just assumed all of our Disney attractions were going to play out the same for everybody everywhere, that I became aware, one particular instance when I was working on a project called Astrozone, which was part of the new Star Tours complex, and it had the Pan Galactic Pizza Port. And across the way, I came up with this little character called Officer Zizix, who was kind of like, you know, the receptionist on Earth from all the intergalactic travel. He was kind of the check-in, and he was this really cute little character. And a little cousin to Sunny Eclipse, for those of you who knows who Sunny Eclipse is at the Magic Kingdom at Cosmic Rays. But back to Officer Zizix, and we had a fellow American there working with me to program the figure, and he was being animated, and his mouth was moving to the Japanese language. And I suddenly observed that we were still in the construction phase, and Japanese construction workers were walking by, and they weren't paying much attention to Officer Zizix. And it just hit me on the head that we're not being sensitive to the nuances, the innuendos of the culture. And I suddenly ran off and I got an interpreter to work with us. So the interpreter knew the lines, and she was able to direct me to direct the animator on what movements would happen and what the character should be doing when this particular phrase is said. And it made all the difference in the world, because once we completed part of one scene, I watched the same construction workers kind of pause and stop as they were carrying lumber and stuff through and giggling and paying attention. And that was it. So although the Disney product is the same around the world, you kind of have to be sensitive and caring about your audience and the culture that is receiving all of that. And it was a great lesson for me. And I really respected kind of the process of that.
That is just absolutely wonderful. You know, you in your book, you write about the idea of having to go and give your pitches, and you talk about pitching in front of Michael Eisner, among others, and all these executives. But can you talk about maybe a pitch that you made that really stands out from the others as something that you just walked out of that room and said, I really nailed that. I really got it this time.
You know, and I've done a lot of pitches, and I've had you know, thankfully some successes, a lot of successes with those pitches. But the one, as you asked that question, the one that first came to mind was the one I was talking about earlier, and that was for Toy Story Midway Mania. And the reason is because Robert and I kind of cooked that up so quickly, and we presented it to Marty Scalar, and Marty liked it so much that he picked up the phone, and Bob Iger over at the studio and the corporate executives over there wanted us to come over right away. And so I remember I had a pickup truck at the time, and Robert and I grabbed our storyboards, threw them in the back of my truck, drove over there, and they weren't really presentational. They were mostly for us to kind of design the story and the sequence and all this kind of stuff. And we explained that going into the room. But we went up to the corporate offices into Bob Iger's kind of side conference room there, and we quickly threw up our storyboards on easels, and we took them through the idea. And you can always tell by the looks on faces and by the interest. And one of the things I've learned over the years is if you can distill your idea down to one line that is like the newspaper headline. In this particular case, it was, Bob, you get to shrink down to the size of a toy and actually ride through Midway games and play them, hosted by the Toy Story characters themselves. And at the end of the session, I mean, you never know how those things are going to go, those pitches. You never know, okay, great, we'll call you later. Oh, work on this, work on that. At the end of the session, they liked it so much that they wanted two. They wanted one for Anaheim and for Florida. And
I'll take two of those.
Yeah. Two of them. And, and this is another great example about how, when I was talking to Robert on our way back to my truck that day after that, 15-minute pitch saying, oh man, that's great, they bought it. Oh no, they bought it. How are we going to do this? I had no idea. But then the other memorable one that I had was, I remember I wanted to pitch, Marty Scalar was trying to bring the submarine voyage back to life at Disneyland. I remember over the weekend coming up with a 3x5 card storyboard pitch for the new Nemo themed sub ride, and Marty's office was 2 doors down from mine, and he came in from the parking lot, and I practically tackled him, threw him in my chair in my office, and took him through the entire pitch. I mean, I didn't even let him get a word in edgewise. I didn't let him get his coffee. I didn't let him put his stuff down. I just took him through the whole thing, and I said, what do you think? And this is an example of actually selling an idea based on the proposed name for the attraction itself. And Marty said, you had me at Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage.
Hey, well, that worked. Yeah. I love, my favorite, when I saw that, when I experienced that at Disneyland, I loved it because because you kind of, if you went on the original, or the original attraction there, you still have that memory, but this was a whole new memory, and it was so well done. And then at the very end, when the music that plays as you leave is Beyond the Sea, which I'm just like going, that encapsulated the whole moment. I just thought that was just the cutest, the most wonderful theme and wonderful theming, and you just send you on your way. So
well, I work with Tony Baxter, another longtime Imagineer in that attraction, and that's another good example of an idea that was ready to happen, because I was working on some stuff independently of Tony, and Tony was working on some stuff independently of me and a couple others, and we were all working to try to come up with something for the submarine voyage. And we all ended up together and working on this one, and it was just a joy.
It's just so incredible to think that storyboards in the back of your pickup end up being something that we are rushing to get fast passes for. We are thinking about, we have all these memories. My favorite memory, just real quick, of we took our son when he was 2.5, nearly 3 years old. And the coolest thing that happened, we went with another couple, and he was with us the whole time. He wanted to ride with us, mommy and daddy, the whole time. And then on Midway Mania, on the last day, he goes, can I ride with Tim and Kara? And he rode with them. And so it's like, I'll never forget that moment of going on Midway Mania. And I wasn't with my child, but just the fact that he felt so comfortable in that space to feel like he could go with someone else. And it's just absolutely incredible. So for us, you are an absolute rock star. And I know that our next question is about you meeting some rock stars. So I thought it was a good transition for that.
Well,
you are the Sultan of Segway, I have to say.
Yes. He's doing so well today.
Oh my gosh, I snorted. I'm sorry. Well, you have an incredible story about the time you met the Rolling Stones and you decided not to party with the band and opted to follow through with your work tasks. I feel like maybe the Rolling Stones owe you a redo. Is that at all a regret for you? And do you have any other celebrity stories that didn't make it into your book?
You know what, Brett? I can't tell you how many times over the years after that happened that I'll run into somebody, like even recently, and they'll stop me and say, "I can't believe you didn't go with the Rolling Stones." That's been living on for years, you know. Regrets.
They're still touring, you know.
Oh,
So.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like all the stories in the book. You can't make this stuff up. And that was a great example of, you know, I happened to be flying to New York, and I was up in the front of the plane. I was all by myself. It was, you know, a minute away from takeoff, and then here comes an airline's agent with the Rolling Stones behind them, and it's just me and the Rolling Stones. And they were in a really good mood. I think they'd been to a wedding or something. And Mick Jagger sat right across the hall from me, and they wanted to know who I was. And I told them who I was. I worked for Disney. I was heading to a meeting in Long Island, and they were in such a good mood. They said, no. When we get to New York, you need to come and party with us. And they kept insisting that the whole way. It's almost like they adopted me because I was the only non-Stones person in the whole section they were sitting in, you know. Oh, wow. And I kept politely turning them down. I said, you know what? I'm such a dedicated Imagineer. I have one day to do this thing. It's a really important meeting. I can't miss it, but thank you very much. And so now my colleagues continuously give me a hassle for turning down the Rolling Stones. But I often wonder, Brett, had I done that, had I just, you know, cast my project fate to the wind and went to New York and partied with the Rolling Stones, you know, would I still be there? What would have happened? I don't know. But it made for a really good story.
Well, you could be touring with the band, you know.
Yeah.
So. It is such a good story. I was reading that going, no way. No, is he dreaming this? This is incredible.
I was living that going, no way. Am I dreaming this?
Well, that's great. Another rock star we have to ask you about is, well, first of all, I love Aerosmith, and I was so excited to read about when you and your son met Steven Tyler. So can you, I mean, what was that like? Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, you know, this is another one in the category of you can't make this stuff up. It was just that particular day. It was a Saturday, and I think my son was 9 or 10 years old at the time, and we had a film session for the pre-show for Rock and Roller Coaster in a soundstage in Hollywood, and so I brought him along with me, and in between takes, Steven Tyler, who I'd become friends with, you know, because we've been working on this project together, came over and he wanted to know who I was with. I introduced him to my son, and he said, "I'll be right back." And he grabs my, you know, 9-year-old son, and he starts heading off with him. I said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to teach this kid the facts of life." And he said, you know, "Leave us alone." So I'm just thinking, well, I don't know if this is good or not, you know? And so they were over in the corner of the soundstage talking for a little while. And then, you know, he had to get back to the soundstage for work. And as we were driving home later that afternoon, and I kind of looked over at my son and I said, so, you know, when Steven took you, you know, over in the soundstage and was talking to you, what exactly did he say? And he said, "Oh, well, he said, hey kid, this is what life's all about. Always remember, this is what life's all about: rock and roll, fast cars, and chocolate cake." You know, and then subsequent to that, I flew back to Boston to do a recording session, just an audio recording session with Steven Tyler, and I went to check the microphone, and I did this thing where I do this thing with my lips where I make a little drip sound.
Yeah.
And he was so enamored with that we spent 30 minutes where we should have been recording stuff where I was teaching him how to drip in front of the microphone. And it was just, those guys were so much fun. Aerosmith, it was so much fun to work with them.
Oh, that's just
my heart.
Absolutely incredible. it's just
Time
so
for
cool
cake.
the experiences that you have had gotten to have over your career, and then bringing those passions to into your work. You know, you mentioned your love for cars, and so they have told me this so many times, Brett and Vanessa. I have not been to Disneyland yet. I will get there, and I will see your wonderful Cars Land. But the road to Cars Land, you mentioned that you traveled down Route 66, and because that comes right through our city here in Springfield, Illinois, we thought we might ask a question of if you ended up stopping here. If not, that's okay. But maybe tell us a bit about your trip on Route 66.
You know what? Unfortunately, we did not stop in Springfield, although I would have loved to. But where we started was Eric, Oklahoma. And we motored west from there. And the highlight of that trip was being accompanied by Michael Wallace, who wrote the quintessential book on Route 66. And he was also the voice of Sheriff in the movie Cars. And he was such a personality and such a character. He just made that trip such a joy. Nobody knew the people and the places better than Michael. And we were very engaged with the whole thing. But my best memory of that trip, and I have a lot of memories of that trip as well, but we drove up this kind of hillside, this craggy hillside, and up at the top of this hill was this old abandoned church. There was a lot of abandoned things along the Route 66 trip, and Michael knew all the stories behind all of them. And I was standing kind of by myself next to Michael, and if you looked out onto the beautiful landscape, you could see Interstate 40 kind of cutting across the landscape. And I was looking at Interstate 40, thinking about that moment in the movie where Sally and Lightning McQueen are there, and she's talking about the interstate. It was that moment, and that's what inspired that moment. And I wasn't looking at Michael, but I heard him say, "Isn't that?" He has real low, great voice. He goes, "Isn't that a beautiful road?" And I said, and I'm looking at Interstate 80, going, "Wait a minute, you're defeating the whole purpose of that. The movie was about the interstate bypassing the towns and putting them out of business and doing all this." And I looked over at him, and he wasn't looking at the interstate. He was looking straight down, and I looked straight down from that kind of overlook, and down below us was this beat up, cracked, weed laden remnant of Route 66. And I could tell how much he loved that. And it was just like, man, he introduced us. Nobody could have introduced us to the lore and the romance of America's Highway better than Michael Wallace could have. And that whole trip was just incredible.
Yeah, that is an incredible story. And we, of course, mentioned that your latest attraction recently opened in Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World. And Vanessa has a question about Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
Oh.
Yes, well, when we spoke to Leslie Iwerks, she told us that you showed her an Easter egg about her grandfather, animator of Iwerks, and that's in the new attraction, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
Right.
So we want to ask, what other secrets and Easter eggs are there in the new Mickey attraction? Something that when we go, we can say, he told us about that one. We know that. You may not know that, but we know that.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I love Leslie Iwerks dearly. She called me and said she was in town. I invited her to walk through. We were still a couple of months away from opening. And the story was so weird because there's a lot of scenes in that attraction, and we happened to step into the big city scene at the very moment. I was talking about, Leslie's family and her family's history with Mickey Mouse and about all the things we have and the hidden gems and all the Mickey stuff. And Leslie just happened to say, as we were passing under this certain area, "So do you have any hidden Iwerks?" And it just, I almost fell over because we were standing right under the hidden Iwerks. And as you're coming into the city, if you look behind you, the name of the building behind you is the Iwerks and Uworks Waterworks. And so it just floored me that she just happened to ask. She couldn't believe that. But yeah, we have, Vanessa, we have lots and lots and lots of things hidden that are nods to history, that are nods to Imagineering, that are nods to Mickey. And one of my favorites is in that same big city scene, there is a flower shop along where all the businesses are in the city. And, Walt Disney Imagineering is on 1401 Flower Street in Glendale, and that is the 1401 Flower Shop. But there are also things that aren't visual that are kind of audio related as well. And one of my favorites is the first words that Mickey Mouse ever spoke in a film. It was in a film called Carnival Kid, and he was a hot dog seller, and he was saying, hot dogs, hot dogs. And so that was the first thing he said. And so in our carnival scene in Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, there's a scene where Mickey and Minnie are trying to find us, and Donald Duck is running a hot dog booth. But what they've done is they broke off the hot dog sign off of Donald Duck's booth, and they bought all the balloons from the balloon booth next to that. They tied it to the hot dog sign. Mickey and Minnie hopped up on the hot dog, and it rises up into view. And the first thing Mickey says is, hot dog! And so that was fantastic. So that was a nod back to his history. So really, seriously, I could talk for hours about all those little hidden things that we have throughout the entire attraction. And I challenge you, you could ride through there 1,000 times and you'd never find them all.
I trust you. We would listen to you talk about all those. And now what we can do though is while we're waiting in line for the attraction, we can go, did you know we spoke to Kevin Rafferty, and when he said that you should be watching out. So that's really what
we're not above that. We'll do that to every single person in the car with us. Now, I talked to Kevin
on your left.
But it's just it's so incredible. And actually that was one of those attractions. I was meant to go on a vacation, and of course had to change plans with everything going on, but looking forward so much to going to see Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And I know we all are looking to see that so much. And Brett, you have some rapid fire questions. We just like to have some fun towards the end here.
So does this mean I have to answer very quickly without thinking?
That's
well,
the
yes,
goal,
go with your gut. Yes,
but we'll listen to whatever you have to say. So you can make your own rules a bit here too.
Oh, okay.
If you'd like to elaborate, certainly we welcome all of those thoughts too. So
okay, good. All right.
Okay. Favorite Disney movie?
Pinocchio. And you know the reason why, because that was one of the things that inspired me to be an animator, but I didn't become an animator. I became an Imagineer instead. I love that movie, and there you go.
Wow. Okay. Favorite Disney attraction?
Peter Pan's Flight. That was the first one I remember as a kid. That was there on opening day of Disneyland in 1955. It's a brilliant example of theatrical showmanship. It was, what do you do with animators from the studio who you ask to come over to take their craft and interpret it into a dimensional theatrical realm, an immersive thing. And it was, if you really kind of pick it apart with the room lights on, it's pretty darn simple, but under show conditions, it's absolute magic. And as a kid, I actually believed I was flying over London, and I still do. So that is one of my all-time faves.
Oh, cool. And the whoosh. I love the whoosh at Disneyland. The whoosh is wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Favorite park snacks?
Oh, without a doubt, the chocolate-covered Mickey-shaped ice cream bar.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Yep. So we have this banter that goes back and forth between the turkey leg and the Dole Whip, and you probably don't want to be a part of that because it can get kind of ugly sometimes. So anyway,
well, you probably thought I was going to say Dole Whip, because most people say Dole Whip, but no, it doesn't stand.
It's okay.
It's not even close to the Mickey bar.
No. And your thoughts on a churro? Yes. No, yeah.
My younger son Brad's favorite food in the world is a churro, and whenever I worked on projects in parks, I would always bring him home a churro, and he thought I was the greatest dad in the world. But I'm not a big churro fan.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, before we get more controversy, favorite Disney restaurant?
Well, you know what? I have to say my favorite Disney restaurant is the Plaza Inn on Main Street at Disneyland, because that's where my humble beginnings were. And there's a lot of history there. And although I do love Disney restaurants all around the world, that one will always have the place in my heart for being the launching point that I had.
Wow, that's good. Did you ever, I can't remember in the book, did you meet John Hench?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. In fact, it was so strange because I did connect later with John Hench, who himself told me the story about Walt wanting him to work on this restaurant, which became the Red Wagon Inn. And John told Walt that he knew nothing about the restaurant business. And Walt told him to go learn everything there was to know about the restaurant business. And so that's the other weird thing, Brett, is in my career, I've had all these connections from the time I was a kid to now, 40 something years later, that a lot of the things that I've been involved with my life, somehow I came across working at Disneyland where there were these, or Imagineering where there were these connections. It's uncanny.
It's wonderful.
Vanessa,
Excellent.
I think you have our final question.
Oh.
Well, you've written this just delightful book that really got me, and I think my co-host, through the beginning of the pandemic. The book describes just everything that I imagined Disney Imagineering to be. So thank you for that. And I want to ask you, what is next for you?
I'm going to Disneyland. No, I'm just kidding. Really, that's a great question, Vanessa. I mean, what's next for me? That's the great thing about being an Imagineer is you don't know what's next. In our roles in creating things and experiences for parks, we don't really know what's next until we kind of create it. So it's almost kind of like inventing the future. So there's a lot of fun and possibility and blue sky opportunity, and just thinking about what's next gets me excited because it gives me a chance to dive back into the optimism and the fun and the happiness of creating experiences that create happiness for guests around the world. So that's what's next.
That is so wonderful. Wow. And just, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. We experience all these amazing attractions that you have helped bring to life. And that's what drives our passion to love Disney, to love the Disney parks. You're such a huge part of that. And we cannot begin to say thank you enough. And your book is so incredible. It's like I said, it's like I was looking forward to this conversation so much because it almost felt like I've already had a conversation with you because of this book. And so it is so wonderful. So people should go out there and check it out. I was joking with you earlier that we are dropping this episode around Thanksgiving. So actually today is Black Friday. It is the best Black Friday purchase you can make to go buy Magic Journey, my fantastical Walt Disney Imagineering career. It's so wonderful. And thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you. It was such a joy to be on with the three of you. And that's you guys are great examples of why Imagineers do what we do, because and love the parks, you enjoy them. And that's what brings us joy. So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for loving Disney and for having me on your show. And it's just been a lot of fun.
This has just been a joy. So we are so appreciative of your time.
Thank you. And right back at you. And did I give you everything you wanted, or do you have what you need?
Yes, I'm like remember whenever you said that you could talk forever? Well, we could go on forever, but,
everything and more.
Have other things to do. So.
That was a really, really, really fun conversation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett.
Just a truly wonderful individual. It was so much fun to get to talk to Kevin. I loved every second of that. Vanessa, talk to me.
I'm giddy. I'm so giddy. He's just what I thought he would be. In the book, he's tells all these puns, and he's delightful and joyful and positive, and he's just like that in person. Maybe he didn't share so many puns this to go around in person, but he is a great storyteller. You can read that in the book, and in real life, he's just like that. He's just a joy to talk to, and wow, I mean, so much experience there, so much love of Disney. It was just everything I wanted it to be and more.
Brett, tell me your thoughts about Kevin.
Well, I mean, he had some life lessons and philosophies, and there's wonderful phrases that I'm going to have tattooed in various places around my body for inspiration. Maybe not, but anyway, so no tattoos, but they are inspiration. So I will, I'll take that. But I loved his stories, and we did get a little bit of information, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I can't wait to go on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway and look at iWorks and WeWorks and We All Works and all of that and just all of that. So, I mean.
And the flower shop.
And the flower shop.
You know we're going to be obnoxious when we ride that ride.
Yes.
Kevin Rafferty told me that is the flower shop. Yes, I'm going to be that person. I don't care what you think of me. This is my life. Let me live it. So I'm so excited. It was so great.
Cool. It was so good.
He has brought so many attractions. It's when you read the book, because if you look at the book cover, he actually has like a great illustration of all these different attractions, and you can see sort of the different types of things that he's worked on. Of course, there's Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway and a Tower of Terror, but there's also Toy Story Midway Mania and Rock and Roller Coaster and Cars Land and Submarine Voyage. And it's just incredible to think that one person touched so many of those different properties that people around the world are just, they have memories of going on those attractions. Yes, part of the vacation and part of the magic of going to Disney is that time that you're spending in the parks and just kind of understanding the atmosphere. But it's almost tactile. You can remember the attractions you went on and you can remember those experiences. And he is the one, he's one of the individuals that has done such a great job to bring that to us. And where would we be without that? We love our fandom. We love our Disney, and he embodies that. So it's just, it was such a treat to get to talk to him today. Just phenomenal.
To think one of your favorite memories, your favorite rides, Toy Story Mania, was once just an idea tossed in the back of his truck. We need to be a little bit more careful with the things we toss in the back of our trucks, because they could end up being, loved around the world. How crazy is that?
What have you recently tossed in the back of your truck, Vanessa, that you might be bringing out?
Sandbags. It's almost winter here in the Midwest, and you have to put sandbags in the back of your truck. And yes, I do drive a truck. Her name is Rosie.
Brett, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just, it being Thanksgiving and all, I'm good. Oh, I could go. Anyway, I am thankful that we have had the opportunity to talk with Kevin Rafferty, and I'm thankful. Yeah, here it comes. I'm thankful for my Beyond the Mouse partners and this show and our wonderful audience. So thank you for listening and putting up with all of my crazy. You too, both, especially you two, putting up with my crazy. But thank you.
Our gratitude list sure is overflowing this year. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot to be thankful for. And we're certainly thankful for you for listening. We appreciate it so much. And if you can continue to spread the word about us, we would love that too. Of course, if you're new to the podcast because you love Kevin as much as we do, we would love it if you would subscribe, go back and listen to some of our interviews. We also talk movies. We just celebrated Brett's birthday a few weeks ago and talked big business. We have some wonderful interviews and things coming up in the near future. And so we would love for you to check us out. You can find us any podcast app by searching for Beyond the Mouse. You can also find us on nprillinois.org. You can follow along with us on social media at Beyond the Mouse Podcast on Facebook, also Beyond the Mouse Pod on Instagram. And of course, we are part of the Front Row Network, and you can find them on all social media platforms too by just searching the Front Row Network. Thank you all so much for today. Again, thank you to Kevin. Thank you for Walt Disney Imagineering for allowing us this interview. And thank you to Disney Publishing for the opportunity to speak to Kevin today. We are just gushing with thanks here on Beyond the Mouse. So for Beyond the Mouse, I am Craig.
I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Brett.
And we will see you real soon in the front row. Maybe the front row of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. What do you think?
Can you
Oh my
imagine?
gosh. That would be great.
Goodness.
Look over there. Did you know the story behind that? Yeah. So.
We should write it with Kevin. We could listen. Oh my good. We could listen to our podcast while we're like in line getting ready to go into the ride when we're in the queue.
Oh man.
God.
There's an idea.
Gosh.